So today I want to install this new brake master cylinder on this Audi 200. OEM unit, customer provided, and as you can see, this one has blinks on these two ports, and these two, or all four ports, are threaded. So I found two bleeder screws that'll fit in here and plug off these ports, and we'll actually use them to our advantage to bleed out the master cylinder more easily. So let's extract all the fluid out of the reservoir and take that off. Let's see if we can get this. I'm really hoping I can get this out. I'm going to use a syringe to do that, and it's just unscrew two lines, two bolts, pop the new one in, and we'll bleed it on the car using those bleed nipples, and then see how the brake pedal feels. So the brake pedal has been feeling better. I've taken it on maybe 3 more test drives. It doesn't stick down anymore when it's hot, so the brakes aren't dragging, but still, if you quickly jam the brakes, it's a nice feel. If you kind of slowly depress the pedal, it sinks about halfway, so there's a leaky seal in that master cylinder. So we're going to replace it since we have the new one. Let me see if I can get this reservoir drained out. So this is my improvised method of draining this reservoir. I'm just taking it out and letting the fluid drain into a magnet tray. No. Okay, so let's undo the second line. Okay, it's out of the way, and it's held on by 2 bolts. Might be a little seized in there. There it comes. Drain that out. Here's our old master cylinder. Here's our new one. Well, I wonder if there's a spacer. They look almost identical. The rod looks identical. I don't know if that spacer comes off the master cylinder. It should. It looks like it would transfer from here to here. I'm going to take that to the bench. So I have the collar gripped in a vise, and it's actually starting to separate. I cleaned off this, lubed it up with WD-40. So let me finish that up. We'll transfer it to the new master cylinder and stick that on the car. Alright, so I'm going to clean out the bore. It's got all the crusties in here. Stick those out. Alright, let's install at least 1 bolt here. Okay. And then screw in these lines. screwing so nice. Threads aren't all crusty. Okay. So we'll tighten these down. And then the bleeders, that's a 10 millimeter, see they're loose right now. So I'm going to get some hoses. They go from here back into the reservoir, which sits right here, and then we'll just pump the brake pedal, keep adding fluid until no more bubbles come from the hose to the reservoir. So that's like bleeding just the master cylinder. We'll close these off, see how the pedal feels. There might be a little air pocket in here, but that should get sucked back in and purged out. Okay, so 2 hoses connected from the bleeders, and I'm going to dump them back into the reservoir. Let's fill it up and start the process. Hopefully this won't get too messy. Alright, I'm going to pump the brake pedal slowly. Let's see what happens. Alright, so now both lines are getting full. There's no more bubbles. Perfect. Okay. Now we can close the bleeders carefully without spilling too much. Let's see how this brake pedal feels. Super tight. I love it. Let's take it on a test drive. Oh, it's never felt that good. Make sure the clutch is happy. Yeah, let's take it for a spin. Alright, so we gotta wait for the brake booster to pump up with the hydraulic system, the servo. Brake pedal feels fine. So once that red light goes out, we can start driving. There you go, boom! Alright, let's try a panic stop on the gravel. ABS works great. Now we can disable the ABS by pushing this button, which is really nice. Locks them up. Alright, let's get to the paved road. Yeah, brakes feel just fine, so that's fixed. Now we gotta do front wheel bearings and loosen up those parking brake actuators in the back again. And then the fuel pump's getting noisy again. So, car's almost roadworthy. It's so close. We're getting there. Front wheel bearings. So, let's look up the procedure to replace the front wheel bearings. They're a press-in type. And here's some pictures. There's the axle shaft, bolt, strut, and knuckle assembly. Those do not come apart. And they basically want us to remove the whole axle. There's a strut assembly. Remove the whole strut and knuckle assembly. Then take it to a press and press this stuff out. Obviously I want to do it on the car with the hub tamer. So we do need to remove the axle out of here. And that is easier said than done. Let me show you. So nothing is easy on this car. Here's our giant strut assembly. I have the fancy rotor removed and the shield. Separated the ball joint. Right there's a pinch bolt. I want to get the ball joint out of the strut so this whole assembly can swing out a little bit so we can take the axle out. Now this ball joint is being very stubborn. You can pull it out a little bit, but then it binds up because the strut kind of wants to come out this way, the sway bar, and this, it's trying to go the other way. I have the other side torn apart, about the same steps. This bolts out, so you would think that the whole sway bar and ball joint assemblies on both sides could drop down, but no. The control arm back here, that's trying to push it up. So what I'm doing is, I've got two spring compressors up here. Now again, they're just helping squeeze the spring a little bit so it's easier to push this strut up with the floor jack. Now that works, but the ball joint still only comes out a little bit. You can see it's kind of at an angle. It's like this, so it comes out and then binds up. It comes up about halfway. So I need to pull the strut assembly in to relieve that binding so the ball joint can finally drop down. So I have a ratchet strap. It's pretty tight on here. It's pulling the strut assembly in. I have these nuts loosened up so if it needs to pivot, it can pivot. And finally, I think that's the right combination. If I push down on this big pry bar, the ball joint is coming out of the hole. So I now have to figure out how to keep that down and either relieve the ratchet strap or something to get the strut out of the way and get the axle pushed out and out of the way before letting that ball joint come back up, because you don't want it to hit the boot or anything. So let me figure out how to do that, and then once the axle's out of the way, we should be able to use the hub tamer to get this hub out, get the bearing out. I have replacement bearings on hand. Hopefully we can get this job done. Alright, so there's the ball joint. I just pivoted it a little bit so it's resting on the knuckle. So now we can undo this ratchet strap carefully. Okay, so that's loose. Now, I'll press down on the pry bar and try to get this. See if the strut assembly will swing out far enough to let go of the axle. Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, axle's out of the way. Now we can release that. Now we have to lower the strut. Okay, axle is happy right there, I think. Should be. Let's see what happens if we slowly lower the strut now. Okay, the tension's relieved. Everything's loose. Okay, I think we should have enough room to get in there with a hub tamer, get this axle a little further out of the way, and do what we have to do. But man, what a pain in the ass process just to replace a wheel bearing. Yeah, you can hear it's not as smooth as it used to be. Alright, so step one of the hub tamer, you gotta get this hub out of the bearing. So just the nut is pushing on the inside of the bearing, or the hub rather, and You gotta be careful. You don't want to bend the knuckle or anything, because if you break this strut assembly, if it's available, is probably gonna cost an arm and a leg. So let's carefully cool. There's our hub and bearing. So, just gotta take the nut off. Back side here. I mean, this whole thing should be able to pull out. Let's keep going a little bit. There we go. So, yeah, it's a double row. The first row came out, and I have to look at the instructions. Is it going to go that way or this way? So to remove the bearing race from the hub, Audi's nice enough to give you little cutouts, and a little two-jaw puller does the job fairly easily. So there's the race. We'll clean that up so the hub is ready. Now we just have to get the bearing out of the knuckle. Alright, so the bearing does indeed come out towards the wheel side. And here they say there may or may not be a circlip. It says from VIN 44KN006601, the outer circlip is deleted. Well, we don't have a circlip, so apparently it's deleted. They didn't need it for some reason. It's just a press fit. So let's get that bearing out. And this is directional bearing. It even warns you, installation position, larger diameter, inner diameter of wheel bearing faces the hub arrow. Okay, I guess you can't really mess that up. Alright, so we're going to use the big cup, which is going to sit right on this edge. And then from the back, install this adapter, which is going to press on the race of the bearing and take it out. So let me set that up. Alright, let's see if the big earthquake can handle it. So you can at least get it started. You can always check your progress. See, the bearing is coming out. It already moved about that far. So we'll keep going. Got it. Beautiful. So the damage isn't big, but you can see on the race the little dots. So I don't know if the light will pick this up. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's all the way around, and this is when the car was sitting for 15 years. And that's where the balls were putting the load on the race. So once you start using this again, the race just got slightly compromised in each one of those locations, because that's where there was no grease. The ball was contacting the race there all the time, and we'll see if the other bearing's worse, but it doesn't look terrible. But that's what happened here. So here's the replacement wheel bearing. BCA, made in China. So, hey, you know what? That's what we got. So, at least it's the right size. Should slip right in. It's a little WD-40. They specifically tell you not to grease the housing. So, I just cleaned it out. And we want to pick the adapter. Is an adapter that just barely fits in here, but you know, freely, you don't want to get it stuck. And that's going to press on the outer race of the bearing. Obviously you don't want to press on the inner race, it might damage it during installation. So that's going to go like this, and we're going to support it from the back with something that doesn't fit through the big hole, but it's pretty close. So kind of like that. Let's press it in. Alright, so now the most crucial part is getting the bearing started straight. You don't want to just drive it home, because if it gets crooked it'll just bind up and ruin something. So right now you can see this side's a little further in than this side. So you can take a hammer and just tap right here on the adapter to kind of help it out. So if you're trying to straighten out this bearing, you can take an air hammer and just gently give a couple of whacks on either side. See, it actually moved. So now tighten up the screw, make sure everything's centered, including the back plate. Make sure that's centered, and then we'll keep driving it home slowly. That's as far in as the old one was. Alright. Yep, that's flush. I'll put the hub back in. Last step is to press in the hub. And same principle, just now we're pressing against the inner race and the face of the hub. So hopefully I didn't forget anything. And you'll feel it bottom out. Now you should feel the bearing. That is super smooth and nice. And obviously the axle will hold everything together. So now I got to put everything back, repeat that on the other side, and then take this thing for a test drive. Hopefully it'll sound a lot smoother going down the road. So to make this job a lot easier, use a beefier ratchet strap. That red one, it kind of bent, and then the whole thing swung out, and it bound up again. But with this one, nice and controlled, and the jack is lifting up the strut. Now the ball joint is starting to find its home. I'm just going to slowly lower that. Just kind of wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. That's it. It went in. Amazing. So get rid of that. Put that down. And now the rest is easy. So the second side should take half the time, since we learned all the tricks on this side. And we'll see how it drives with the new bearings. So we're getting the Audi ready for delivery to the customer. Front wheel bearings, very nice and quiet, so that problem's fixed. Trying to figure out the speedometer. So this is the replacement cluster. And you can see this speedometer is also acting kind of goofy. It's just jumping around. I mean, the speed is more accurate, but why is it doing that? I have no idea. And I noticed the cruise control stopped working. And we know that the speed signal comes from the cluster. So this could also be potentially messed up. So we have two broken speedometers in these clusters. That kind of sucks. Yeah, well, I don't know. We might put the original one back in and he'll just have a lazy speedometer.